more conversation is about the small stores and whether we're including them. Like, are we discriminating between Ace Hardware and 7-Eleven have to do this, but Soper Slickers and the co-op?
Ace Builders first.
Right. But the co-op would not have to pay the bag tax, but Ace would.
So those are all things. I do want to just make sure that, like, even if tonight's purpose is an initial discussion, and then maybe probably reports on it, and maybe people pay attention a little bit more. And,
So I promoted Lonnie to a panelist, but it doesn't seem to have taken.
Did you make me the host?
Yeah.
but
That's weird. There we go. And Lonnie, did
I made
you?
her a panelist?
no, she said something like this.
It's all COVID.
She's a panelist. She's a panelist.
It's all good.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's what she said.
true.
Jackie, can I have an agenda?
I guess I better widen this view.
Can't teach an old horse new tricks, you know that, don't you?
You know, if I had better access to a printer, I'd print it myself. I couldn't
No,
even
it's
print it.
bad. Being bad.
My printer at home is tied into my wife's work, her computer, so I have to ask her for permission, and my printer at work, I can't get on her internet for it.
I don't even have a printer at home anymore, which
Yeah,
is
well, we don't
very
have it.
weird for me.
I mean, for this online job, they sent her a printer.
Ah,
So,
so can you email it to her and have her?
that's what I- but there's a-
Right. Then I looked in preparation for this watering restrictions conversation. I looked in the UDC with Jared this afternoon. We have absolutely zero in our UDC that has anything to do with watering restrictions of any kind. Not how much of your property you can irrigate, not, it doesn't say water conservation
We had
anywhere
somewhere-
in
I
it.
thought we had something
It's
about
indirect. There
the
was
landscaping.
The water rights dedication ordinance is
Mhm.
governed by the 5 per 100 square feet of it.
Okay,
So there is a nexus, like if a developer comes in and says, I want 2 acres of irrigation, they're gonna paint it as
mm-hmm.
2,000 square feet. But we could put in just finite maximum.
Yeah, it just doesn't, I just want you to know that we just don't have much right now. So it'll probably be pertinent to the conversation, so I want you to know. But that's good to know, because I
Do we
wasn't
know
aware of that.
April if somebody's coming?
She's coming, supposed to be online. She's in Denver. Mhm. Hi, Colin.
This is my last meeting as clerk.
Is that right?
Yeah, because
It's-
Jessica will
it's
take
n-
over she starts on the 6th and her first meeting will be the 14th. I mean, I'll be here, but she's gonna be the clerk,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Have some ceremony.
Well, for purposes of the logistics,
one
yes,
clerk.
but we're not letting you go that easy.
No,
Good
I'll
luck.
be here. I'll be here, but she's got some interesting stuff coming up. New liquor license, pot license.
I'm just really glad that we're gonna have a good 3 weeks of overlap for
Yeah, we
court,
don't
for
have that
meetings.
Any of our other senior positions.
We tried, but we
Right? But just
couldn't
the way it-
pull it off.
Yeah, that's-
So
Well, if I get invited to like Bora Bora or something, sorry.
I'm gonna put a freeze on your vacation.
Yeah, right.
I'll say that in book really quick.
Great. No vacation or sick days within 60 days of retirement.
I talked to a friend of mine and do you know what Funko is?
Yeah,
Funko,
yeah.
it's a game, like they
Mhm.
play,
I have never played it, but
and
yes.
so she played it with Cindy Net. Jessica's mother-in-law
Mhm.
used to live in the White House before Jessica moved in there. And I'm like, so have you ever met her? And she goes, yeah. And, you know, she goes, I was really impressed with her. So I'm just like, right on.
Yes, we like that.
So we don't really need, we're not voting, they're not voting on this water, right?
They could if they wanted to.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, this will take. Joe used to be 6,000 people.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to, but potentially. They could. If they voted on anything, it would only be to have us prepare a regulation. Yeah. I don't think they're gonna vote on that, and I don't think they're gonna vote on the bag fee ordinance. They'll probably continue it.
Okay. Why is it two?
There's just a couple of questions about it. About the definitions of a small store versus a store. And are we including places like Super Slickers or? Because the state expanded it, but they, like Ace Hardware and 7-Eleven would have to pay the co-op and Super Slickers would not. Based on the definitions in the state. And that doesn't make sense. If we're gonna expand it, we should have it be like,
Yeah.
to everybody. So, and that's how I wrote it in there, but. You know, I don't know what the board's gonna wanna do, because that's not what's in the state bill. That's in Steamboat's ordinance too. They included them.
No, I think
Where is everybody?
Everybody just arrived.
Don't even.
She said, where is everybody? And I said, everybody just arrived.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Must be one of those days. Everybody's running. Hey, I got a present for you. And there's Marty. I'll bring your present.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday, Marty.
Thank you. It is.
My husband's birthday too.
I know.
He's had whole meeting leftovers.
Municipal budget, just
What?
like I always wanted. And there's a line item in there for me, right?
Right.
Oh, no, I do like it. I have to search for my line item, make sure it's in there.
So I have a question. Last year, did you get a budget book?
No, we've never gotten one before.
What do you think about that?
I think it's great.
I wouldn't have asked for it printed throughout the process. But I know this was gonna-
Yeah, I don't think we would have.
No, I. But this is better. You have a nice cover. Hey. Hi, Chris. Come on. Buddy still got a drink bag on.
I tell you, it's my whole ass. Have time to stop home, pick up my Yeti and this and that's it.
We're glad you made it. All right, I think we're ready to get started.
Does this constitute a quorum?
Yeah,
Yes.
Lonnie's online too.
Oh, okay.
Those four, I believe, is our,
Okay,
yeah, we're.
no, hi, Lonnie.
Is that right, Kathy? Four is a four?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right, Kathy, could you get us started on the roll call, please?
Lonnie Kitching,
Here.
Oh. Oh,
Did
you
she say
okay?
here?
She did.
oh.
She did, she is very sickly here.
Oh my God.
Sorry, Lonnie.
I'm doing my best.
Ben Bompock,
Here.
Chris Hassig.
Here.
Marty Silverstein,
Here?
Erica Sparhawk, Luis Yanes, Colin Laird.
Here. Right, so Luis and Erica notified me that they weren't able to be here. Lonnie's online, not feeling well, but thank you, Lonnie, for being part of the meeting. Get started. We have a consent agenda, which consists of accounts payable, Board of Trustees meeting minutes from January 10th, art gallery permits for Carbondale Arts and the Carbondale Play Center, owner's representative contract for the Aquatic Center representative, and a Crystal River restoration contract amendment. Any questions or comments on any of those items?
My only question is just, we are pretty confident we're not delaying next year. That's not a mistake, was it?
Delaying, which is the one.
I just, in that contract, there's like $59,000 bump in there fee.
Oh, on the
construction
Aquatic Center.
per year. I guess just, we think that's. We're all okay with that.
So I, do you have your mic on? I can't hear
Sorry.
you.
I
What
have
did
to,
you say? I'm sorry.
I just, in that contract, there's quite a bump in their fee if we have any unexpected delays, it seems like, into next year. It's a $60,000.
no, the
Okay.
Wember contract. Would you like to hear from Wember? Because they're online.
Oh.
So, Dave, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's not for unexpected delays. The way we put together the contract was with an option one of a very aggressive approach, and that was trying to start the construction this fall after the pool closes and working to get the construction done before the summer of 24 so that we didn't lose a season of the pool being open. But there are challenges with that. From working through the winter on a pool is a little bit dicey. It involves some sensitive plastering that's temperature sensitive. So it would require some high level of effort to ensure you still get a quality pool. And so what Eric had asked us to do was also project if we did option B on the schedule, which is waiting until the warm weather in the spring and building the pool through the warm months, the spring of 24, what would that look like in terms of our fees? And so that number is purely to address that second option, if that's where we go with the schedule. I hope that makes sense.
All right, so that just, it's because that delay just adds a lot of work to your plate, essentially.
Yeah, we're a consultant, kind of like an accountant or an attorney. We're here to represent your needs in those relationships with the architect and the contractors. And it's essentially a time-based proposition. And so if we're spending longer in the design, longer in the construction, going farther into 24, there's just additional time associated from our end.
Just related to the pool issue, have we decided yet if we're gonna have the pool open this whole summer? Or are we still contemplating different options?
Do you want me to answer that? I'm happy to answer that. We would like to have the pool open most of the summer, potentially close it a little bit early so that we can start demolition. But we're not sure that's going to be possible just with regard to the speed at which we can get the design done, the availability of materials, the availability of contractors, RFP process, et cetera. So that's why
Okay.
there's an A lane and a B lane.
Okay, I understand that. I also understand we had such problems with the pool last year and getting parts for it, that it may or may not be feasible.
Correct.
So it sounds like we either way, either we pay more in terms of probably higher construction costs if we're trying to push people, or we pay Wember if we go into it longer.
It may be higher construction costs even if we go into it longer, because just, things cost more as time goes on. So I know that I'll speak for Eric because he's not here, but I know that we were very pleased with Wember's ability to say, we'll try to calculate those costs and the differentials as much as we can so that you can make educated decisions.
Yeah, good question. This is a big contract I have on consent agenda. We discussed it some last time, but I appreciate those detailed questions. My only question on that one was the lump sum fee is referenced. At first, I thought that was going to be the whole almost $200,000 lump sum, but then as I read, just to clarify, that's a lump sum on that payment schedule. So it's just that each scheduled billing is a lump sum rather than, is that correct?
Correct,
Okay. I'm not paying the whole thing.
correct.
Okay. Any other questions about the aquatic center contract or anything else in the consent agenda? Or motion?
I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second. Motion by Marty, second by Colin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, thanks. And thanks for being here. I think it says Dave.
Dave Detweiler.
Yes, my pleasure. Hope to be seeing you all many times in the future as we update you on the progress.
Yeah, we look forward to the partnership and we're really impressed by your application. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We look forward to working with you.
All right, next item is persons present not on the agenda. Don't see anybody here in person. Is there anybody online? If so, that would like to speak on something not on the agenda, you can raise your Zoom hand, please. Not, we will move along. Trustee comments. Wants anyone? Right?
I don't want to disappoint you,
Okay,
man.
you're alive.
Two things. I'd like to extend our condolences to the Grambois family on the passing of Mark Grambois, especially Will and Mike and his ex-wife. Also to the family of Morris Cohn, had been one of the first cardiologists in this valley. As a matter of fact, in Aspen, he was on the board of Aspen Valley Hospital. And just got word that he had passed away. So I want to thank everyone for their service and our thoughts. I don't know if this is why our flags are at half mast, but the shootings are coming hot and heavy. It seems like a day doesn't go by that there's another one. So our thoughts are with the victims and the law enforcement personnel that are having to deal with this as well. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Marty. That I was gonna also give my condolences. Just give my admiration to Mark for his dedication to KDNK. People around the community. And on a lighter note on KDNK, I was really impressed to hear Liam Laird and his way out west tent. Sound phenomenal. And I'm sorry I missed the Steve's show, but it's just such a testament to I think that's our ultimate goal as a creative community, is creating people like Liam who are creating great art and sharing it.
Great, thanks, Chris. Colin?
If it's streaming on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Look up
Yeah, grassroots.
Grassroots, yeah, you can rewatch it if you want. We attended the board meeting for the regional housing entity. We're still waiting a word from DOLA in terms of the discussion at the last meeting around match and all that kind of stuff. So we'll get that back to you soon. Do you guys get the cast emails?
Yeah, I think we all do, and that's actually something we should talk about in the upcoming agenda, is just if we want to appoint a representative to respond to those things and how we want to manage that.
That's the Association of Ski Tenants, right?
Yeah,
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 I've been getting those.
On Thursday, right?
up in Steamboat, yeah.
They are, yeah, it was kind of last minute and we decided like, let's pass on this one and then talk about how we want to manage
Yeah,
it.
so that you might have noticed there was a email from their director about Governor Polis's potential housing plans. So, yeah, it's just something for us to keep aware. I mean, if he has ideas, some of these ideas might be good, and some of them might actually be rather problematic. So eventually we might have to have a discussion on what our positions are for that. See what we want to do. And that is all I have.
Great, thanks, Colin. Lonnie, I'm gonna give you an opportunity if you wanted to add any comments, but I know that your voice is not in great shape, so. feel free.
It's not in great shape. Can you hear me okay? No?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you fine.
Well, I'll just do one quick one. To date, there have been 6.2 million birds lost statewide, mostly Canada geese, due to the avian flu. Human Health Services is asking that if the public notices particularly waterfowl behaving oddly or come across one or more birds that have expired, to please keep your distance and do not attempt to take care of it yourself. Simply call the CPW Service Center in Glenwood, and a staff member in PPE will come out to address it. There have been no reported cases of bird to human transmission, but in case there could be an exception, we don't want to be that guy. And I'd urge parents to make sure their curious children receive this message as well. Okay, I'll go with one more since I'm okay for the moment. There's a swim update, and when you hear me report on swim, this is the detox program that we've invested in, not the new pool facility, and it stands for Social Setting Withdrawal Management. We had our first governance meeting last week, which was more of an orientation with the other program contributors, including EMS and police, to hear about admission protocols, transport, and other logistics. Regarding the build out, like most construction projects, the current inflationary cost exceeds their budget, so they've hired an owner's rep and asked the governance group to step in and help with the vetting and hiring process. A little disappointing, as we expected to see a close to finished product, but at this point, it probably won't be until summer. I went over to see what it looks like. And the offices are well appointed and fully functional, but the detox ward, I'll call it, sorry guys, which is about the same size as the 2 meeting rooms you're sitting in, and is still just a shell. So more work yet to be done before they can actually start seeing people. If you're interested, it's 2 buildings past Berthoud Motors, on the corner of 27th and Grand Avenue along the Roaring Fork River, right? And I'll stop there because I'm just gonna not be able to continue. Thank you.
Thanks for those updates, Lonnie, and thanks for serving as our representative on that detox facilities swim governance organization. My comments are, we got a nice card here, which I'll pass around from English in Action, thanking us for their community grant. That's notes about the good work that they do. Colin and I both attended the RAPTA board meeting a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks now. A couple items of note from that agenda. We approved additional funding for the 27th Street underpass project in Glenwood Springs. I mean, you talk about a project whose cost has escalated over time, and it gets over $20 million now to do, and it's a two-way underpass because it's going to go under Highway 82 to connect the sides of that, and then also under 27th Street. And we did have a discussion about sort of, is there a point at which it's not worth it when it gets up in that kind of stratospheric level? But it's, you know, there's quite a few $1 million in grants hanging on that. It was a major commitment as part of the Destination 2040 project that probably helped get the voters of Bloomwood Springs to approve that property tax that's really helping RAF to do all the good work that's looking at that. And ultimately, we approved it, but it was kind of painful to approve. And we're all getting used to that cost escalation. RAF shared a really great work plan for the year. They continue to just check things off their very extensive to-do list for Destination 2040 and expanding services. And then the other item of note that was picked up in the newspaper was that we formed a subcommittee, which I am helping with, to really discuss the transportation future of Garfield County and really from a Garfield County perspective. So at first the question was like, should we try to get Western Garfield County communities into RAFTA? I think that's later in the discussion. And we met for the first time online this afternoon. And they have a presentation from the transportation engineer of Bloomwood Springs to present some travel data to the Garfield County commissioners. That really just shows that it's not just about people going up valley into Pickens County anymore. You know, Garfield County has thousands of commuters a day coming from Rifle and Silt and Newcastle. And a lot of them, Carbondale area is actually their destination. And a lot of basalt and kind of the mid-valley, it's not actually all going all the way up to Aspen and Snowmass like maybe it was a couple decades ago. So I'm optimistic about that. And the growth projections for Garfield County are that that's where the population is going to grow over the next couple decades. And the roads are close to capacity now at rush hour. So hopefully that'll be up to. I also attended a Garfield Clean Energy meeting. I believe that was last Friday. And we talked about the kind of the work plan for the year. Had a good update from Adam Berry, who's the Colorado Energy Office Building Code Project Manager. So there's a lot of support coming from the governor's office on energy code adoption. So that's something we might be able to tap into through Garfield Clean Energy, and they have some good connections there. And then on clean mobility, so to get down to that section to remember the details, but the goal is to transition at least 15% of vehicles to battery electric essentially in the next 10 years. And so they are working on some projects toward that. A workshop where you can ride and drive on June 4th. A symposium this summer in Garfield County on clean transportation, some grant submissions, things like that. So I continue to just remind us that Garfield Clean Energy is really our partner on a lot of these energy goals that we have. And they have the staff and the resources through CLEAR to tap into grants, tap into other expertise and help move things forward. And then I wanted to acknowledge Kathy just told us this is her last meeting as our clerk. She'll still be here. We're not letting her go yet. And so I'm sure they'll do something else to acknowledge Kathy's tenure with the town. But this is the last one where she's sitting in the clerk's chair. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yep.
All right. Any other board member comments? Trustee comments? All right. Mark, Trustee's comments?
Nothing right now.
Laura, manager.
Well, you set me up pretty well. Our new town clerk will come in on February 6th and have a good 3 weeks of overlap with Kathy. So we're excited about that. And we have a planner. So, so February 13th, she'll be starting, and I've already asked her to come and introduce herself at the February 14th meeting. So, and some of you may actually know her because it's Kelly Amdor, who's been working for the rec center for a while and used to own the Dandelion Inn. So who knew she had real planning chops? I didn't know. Been having a bunch of remote meetings with Amy Kimberly, with Art Space. We got together today and talked about some grants and what we were doing with our applications and what other grants might be out there, but also Art Space is working very diligently on trying to prepare a sort of an initial timeline for pre-development, for RFPs, for visits back to Carbondale and coming to report to the board, et cetera. So I will have that to report on fairly shortly, maybe next week, maybe the week after. Also, without question, you will all have the comprehensive plan in your hot little hands in a hard copy by our next meeting. I can get them to you before that. But we've just been doing a little struggling about colors with the printer, but Jared reported to me that we may have that by early next week. And happy birthday, Marty.
Thank you.
Is it today?
It is today.
Wow, yeah, we had Eric.
You
Eric
can
is
only
this
have
last
board meetings
Tuesday.
when it's someone's birthday.
Mine is this Tuesday and
All right. Happy birthday to you. Thanks,
still
buddy.
here.
Lucky for us. Okay, we're right on time to move into the watering restrictions discussion. I think we have a presentation from April, from the Ruedi Water and Power Authority Initiative. We have a thorough memo from Kevin. Thank you for that, Kevin. A lot of background. This is a big one, I'd say. There's a lot of detail to this. It's a complex issue. I might just frame it by saying that our goal this evening is to really understand and clarify what our goals are, what the best strategies are to get to those goals, why it may or may not make sense for us to participate in this valley-wide effort. And if we don't get to a formal decision tonight, that's okay. I actually don't really expect us to get to a formal decision tonight. This is our first time discussing it, and there's no to it than I was expecting. But I thought it was going to be kind of straightforward, and it's not. It's a complex issue. So with that, we've dedicated a full hour to this. So we've got time, and I'll hand it over to, I guess, I don't know. Kevin,
Do you want to start or do you want April to start? April, do you have a presentation or are you just going to speak?
I do not. I was just going to speak and answer questions, and happy to go in whichever order pleases the trustees.
I think it makes sense, April, since this is a proposal coming from RWAPA, if we start there and start with kind of the why and the goals behind that, and how you arrived at this specific proposal. And I appreciated all the background research. I can't say I read every single line of that very tiny font spreadsheet, but I appreciated it being there, and read through a lot of your research and then our staff response to that. And so maybe we'll start with you, April.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me tonight. And it's good to see you all again. Happy New Year. I am April Long. I'm the executive director for the Ruedi Water and Power Authority, which we call RWAPA. Lonnie Kitching is the trustee representative from your group that sits on the board that directs my work. And so just as a reminder, we are comprised of an elected official from every jurisdiction in the watershed, except for Garfield County. So the way that this project began is in 2015, all of our municipal water providers developed their own municipal water efficiency plans. And so Carbondale, as a municipal water provider, has a municipal water efficiency plan. In doing so, we found that there were lots of common recommendations and actions in those individual municipal water efficiency plans. And RWAPA's mission we work best, or the way that we work is in spanning these jurisdictional boundaries and putting forth projects and programs and policies that are better implemented and more efficient in achieving results when they're implemented across the entire basin rather than individually. And so it came to RWAPA's attention that there may be need for a regional water efficiency plan where we could bring in those common recommendations from the individual municipal water efficiency plans, bring them into one spot and look at them as a region rather than looking at them individually. In that regional water efficiency plan that was developed in 2015, one of the biggest recommendations and requests from our municipal water providers was to develop a comprehensive and regional education and outreach plan and message. So let's take that on as a region rather than we all have our own individual messages. In 2015, the RWAPA was being directed by the executive director was Mark Fuller at the time. So I came into the executive director role in 2018. In 2020, I picked back up this regional water efficiency plan to see how much progress we had made and where RWAPA could be effective, and brought back together this group of municipal water providers who had helped build the original regional water efficiency plan. In that meeting, we talked about the desire of all of these municipal water providers. They still had that strong desire and need for a common regional education and outreach plan and message. So we began talking about what would one look like? What do we want to say? What would be helpful for us to say to the residents of the Roaring Fork Basin about water efficiency? And we kind of quickly stumbled upon ourselves because we realized that it's really quite confusing. Aspen was in a drought. They were in a stage 2 watering restriction. Basalt has permanent watering restrictions. Carbondale had not enacted any yet. And so it became really confusing as to what are we even going to say if we can't understand where we all start from, what is a drought, what triggers a drought. It's different for all of us. It's different for all of our communities. What message would we build upon? Where would we start? And so that question right there, that conundrum is what started this project that we're going to talk about tonight. I just want the trustees to keep in mind that the entire point of a baseline watering standards, which is what we're talking about, is just to give us that first initial footing, that level playing field that we're all going to start from for an education and outreach campaign. And so it's just kind of one piece of the education and outreach campaign. And I say that with emphasis at the beginning because throughout this entire year of this project, it has been made very clear by all of our staff, by any stakeholders that have participated in the process, and certainly by our RWAPA board, that none of this would ever be successful and is not as useful without this education and outreach campaign. So this is the beginning, and that's a piece of this bigger puzzle. Okay, so that being said, RWAPA proposed and received an accelerator grant, which is not funding, but actually technical staff time from Water Now Alliance and Western Resource Advocates to look into what a common regional message, regional baseline watering standards could be. And so they, all of that information was what Kevin provided to you in your package, is the results of the year-long effort to look into that. So they researched where all of our individual communities are, where we have some commonality and where we may differ, what are other communities across Colorado, across the West doing when they talk about baseline watering standards, and do they enact them during droughts, or do they have baseline standards year round? And so that research has been included in your package. And then we had several meetings with our municipal water providers to see how feasible something like this is, where, how could we come together on all of this? Where would one provider like to have this flexibility? What variances should we offer? What exemptions should we offer? Those kinds of things. And then all of that information was packaged into our consultant's proposal for these are the baseline watering standards that appear to be the easiest to adopt in the Roaring Fork watershed. And we took that proposal to the RWAPA board in their November meeting. And our RWAPA board agreed that this was a great idea in pushing the envelope, pushing us forward on water conservation as a region. And so they agreed that we should take this back now to all of you all for adoption. So I think it got confusing. There was an article in the paper that sounded like it had been adopted. Obviously, the RWAPA does not provide water. We're not a water provider, so it's not something that we can adopt. It was simply a nod of the head that from the RWAPA board that this is a good idea, and now we can and should begin discussing it with all of you for adoption. And so that's the process and how we got to where we are today. What we are proposing is that all of our municipal water providers, including some of our metro districts, or all of our metro districts ideally, would adopt a watering standard, what we're calling a regional watering standard, that would include a watering schedule. So that's kind of the meat of what the proposal is this watering schedule that would provide us with the same watering schedule, no matter where you live in the valley. And so I think that we heard a lot that it was very confusing if you live in Glenwood Springs, but you work in Aspen, to hear on the radio the different types of watering suggestions or recommendations or requirements that may be out there. Certainly, we heard that it was confusing for our landscaping and irrigation design specialists that are installing and kind of overseeing these irrigation systems up and down the valley, that they have to do something different in Glenwood than they do in Carbondale, than they do in Basalt. And that this kind of common baseline message would be ideal. And so the proposal is for a schedule that limits watering during the day. And so there would be no watering from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then that assigns every other day watering schedule based on your address. And then there are exemptions that all of our communities requested along the lines of, we do not want our tree forest, our urban forest to suffer. So there would be exemptions for watering trees. There's exemptions for new landscaping installations, exemptions for maintenance. And there's kind of an entire list. I won't go through all of them, but and then we would have a common violation schedule so that when and if we decided to enact any enforcement, that could be enacted regionally. We could hire regional enforcement rather than individual enforcers. And again, it's noted that, none of our communities have the staff and sometimes even the interest in enforcing something. This is heavily weighed on an education component at this time. And I kind of stop right there and see if Kevin wants to add anything or if you have any initial questions, but I would love to have a dialogue with all of you about what this may mean for Carbondale.
Thanks, April. Yeah, go ahead. The one thing I will say is you did a really good job of putting that together with the last minute notice about this, so thank you.
No problem.
April, can you just clarify? I appreciate that clarification that this is a regional baseline watering standards as the foundation for messaging, outreach, and education. That makes sense to me. What about actual water savings, water conservation? I felt like Kevin did a great job presenting us with sort of a body of research and what works and what doesn't. And it suggested that, baseline standards like this, day of the week type things, when they're in place forever, don't really have a big impact sometimes that we'd like to see on actual water use. So is there like a water reduction goal? We understand that our system is really different from a lot of systems. Kevin did a great job explaining that to us. We don't have a storage issue where we need to refill a tank on a certain day of the week like they do in some Up Valley communities. So just tell us a little bit more about what would we hope to see out of this, other than just consistent communication.
No, thank you for that. So there is no water savings goal that RWAPA or even the municipal water providers or regional water providers had in mind with this. I think taking kind of your question apart in pieces, every other day watering schedules can have significant water savings when they've never been implemented before. So when you're in a community that's never had any kind of attention or has never received any education or kind of idea that watering does not need to occur every day, and you're taking them from kind of willy-nilly watering down to a schedule, you would see water savings in those communities. In the Roaring Fork Valley, we have several communities that are already doing an every other day watering schedule. It's just not the same day in every community, right? So it's confusing. Like Glenwood Springs does even odd. Snowmass does one side of their the north side versus the south side of the road or something like that. So it's just kind of inconsistent, but almost all of our communities have enacted a watering schedule already. It's just not the same watering schedule across the board. So we don't anticipate actually seeing a significant savings just by implementing a schedule. And that's kind of to Kevin's point, like that's not where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck in water savings. We do think that we would see a significant water savings in an education and outreach campaign. So where we bring everyone's attention to their management of their own water system, kind of in the same way that you bring everyone's attention to how long they spend showering or how long they spend brushing their teeth. A community may not actually see or be able to measure the water savings from that, an education and outreach campaign, but we do know that it is helpful for people to begin to be intentional about their water use. There is a common misunderstanding about how much water lawns need across Colorado, across our valley. And so this would be the piece of the campaign that kind of sets the foundation for your lawn only needs to be watered every other day. And here's the days of the week that we've assigned you. Because I think that people, when left faltering, they don't know exactly what they should be doing. So this is, again, that piece of that education and outreach campaign. I do think that Kevin's points about, if you are looking for significant water savings, it would be in reducing your demand, and you reduce your demand by reducing the amount of allowable landscape. And that's kind of been a common thread throughout all of our meetings this year of like, really, that's where you get more water savings. However, that requires a lot more effort by consultants and by this town and the staff in adopting new land use code. And then you only get the savings at the rate of development and redevelopment, right? So you're only seeing that happen when a lawn comes in for redevelopment, or if you roll out a big incentive program like turf replacement and kind of buy that back. And so it requires more effort than this broad-based education and outreach campaign, which we're going to do region-wide and which would not require significant effort, and you're not waiting for the rate of change of development. You're able to kind of educate people immediately.
Great. Couple follow-up questions, and we'll see who else has questions. I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to really explain a few things. In those communities that already have the watering schedules you mentioned, do we see lower per capita water use there? Do they feel like those have had an impact over time? I understand that you said they'll just be adjusting them. We might see a decrease because it would be new to us, but do you see evidence that that's having some impact on people's water use in those communities?
I definitely do know that there has been an impact. Again, water savings are like these are difficult. So take Aspen, for instance, who has been in a stage 2 drought restriction for 2 to 3 years. They have seen a reduction in their demand. It's hard to know what is causing that reduction in demand, right? When you put in a blanket drought message, is it their parks department who has made a significant cut in how much they're watering their parks, or is it in residential customers? And I think that I can ask the city of Aspen to kind of provide us with their parsing of their data to see what they've seen in the last few years. It's also difficult because when you're in a drought, people will begin, if they're not following these restrictions, they'll begin to water more frequently, and they believe their lawn needs more watering, right? So you kind of get that topsy-turvy part.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about enforcement? As you said, that's a concern for towns like Carbondale with limited staff. And it sounds like watering restrictions aren't necessarily effective unless there's enforcement. So how do you see that playing out?
Well, I do think that none of our communities are intending to enforce upon this initially. it does provide the platform for it to be enforced upon. So the thought or the discussion that we've had is that right now we don't have baseline watering standards, and you have to go into a drought restriction and then intend to enforce on your drought restriction. Having a common baseline that's enacted all of the time permanently sets this like low level standard. And then as a part of your drought response, you could then go straight to enforcement. So rather than saying in your drought response, we're now going to have watering restrictions and then we're going to enforce those watering restrictions. If you have a baseline standard like this, your action during drought could simply be, and now we're going to enforce and ensure that you're following these restrictions. And then I think the part that is being favored regionally is that if we have the same standard in place, that enforcement could happen on a regional scale rather than each individual water provider having to hire and enforce on their own. So the idea might be that in a year of drought, we would seek a grant to fund, 1 or 2 enforcement officers for that season. And so that would be your drought response is the enforcement. But agreed, it's not, no in community is intending to enforce upon this right away. This is just to give you a place to start from that could be enforced upon when needed.
Okay. My last question for now, and I'll be quiet, is can you just tell us if we were able to save a lot of water, what good would that do? Like, I think that there's this question in Carbondale because we're actually kind of water rich. We've read the details on most of our water is returned to the system either through the wastewater treatment plant or through the groundwater system. And we understand use it or lose it rights and things like that. But we also are aware of, all the news around the Colorado River Basin and climate change and all those sorts of things. So how would you sum up kind of the big picture goal with this whole valley did a great job and saved a lot of water? What positives would we see from that?
Yeah, it's definitely confusing. Water providers hate for their community to be concerned about how much water they have and if they're going to have enough water. And I totally understand that. While I believe that Carbondale has many water rights, its portfolio is beautiful and it has lots of water sources and its diversified portfolio, I would not say that Carbondale is a water rich community. All of us in the arid West are experiencing climate change at the most rapid pace of anywhere in the country, particularly in Western Colorado and in Eastern Utah. And so what that means is that we have increased in temperature, which is drying us up. And the results are evident already in the Colorado River Basin. We have 20% less water in the river than we had historically. And Carbondale is part of the Colorado River Basin. So it's not that the drought is happening over Grand County or over Grand Junction. It's happening in the Colorado River Basin. It's happening in Colorado. It's happening in Carbondale. There is, on average, 20% less water in the Crystal River. So whatever we can do and should do to use less water means that we are not pulling that water from our river system, from our aquifers, from our neighbors. All right. So when we use less water, and if we stop growing, let's say that if we use less water and stop growing, then we would see more water in our rivers. The water that we don't take out to use in our lawns and in our houses is left into our river system. And so I know there's a huge concern by Carbondale citizens for the health of the Crystal River. And this would be one way that the community of Carbondale could assist in that. I know that often in the Colorado River Basin, there's a lot of finger pointing in times of crisis, not just in water crisis, but in all crisis. People immediately want to blame a different person. And I think that this this crisis, this climate change crisis is affecting our community. We do not, it is a better approach to lead by example than to point your finger at your neighbor. And so I think that Carbondale and all of our communities could stand from taking the first step forward, or many of the first steps forward, in showing the proper use of water, the sacrifice that we're all willing to make in our landscapes to use less water on them. And that could help drive the message to your neighbors who may be using more water.
Okay, thanks, April. Trustees, questions for April, and then we'll hear from Kevin as well, and just have a discussion, but anything you wanted to clarify about the proposal?
That was great.
Okay. Lonnie, you can just unmute or raise your hand anytime, and I'll keep an eye. I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'll try. So in the report that we got from the Water Now Alliance, there was an assumption made that each of the residences had control of their own water controller, which is not the case in several subdivisions of Carbondale. So that's one thing that is going to, that was kind of a flawed assumption, which is a broad assumption. I totally get it because we're dealing with households, but there are some infrastructure challenges here that need to be considered. The other thing is, and was pointed out in the report, that we do use ditch water, and that reduces our need for water production, which our community over time has shown to be very aware of and responsible. In her weekly reports, Lauren very conscientiously will give us the million gallons per day, and the public has a chance to recognize that as well. So, I'm all for, as we all were when we adopted this, for the messaging, but then what's the end result? So is the end result ready to be in this policy that really wasn't, that came on as an aftermath of the actual work for the messaging? So the messaging was the most important thing, and how will that then, what parts of the messaging will drive what we want to achieve in conditions of drought and so forth. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing to everybody, but each municipality has its own nuances and methods of operation. And I feel that our water managers, as I said at the Garfield County Water Forum, have done an outstanding job in keeping our operations solid and our water secure, our water supply secure. So, we need some creative way to adapt or adopt this to our situation in order to participate with the wider valley. And whatever we land on as the messaging will be very helpful. And maybe we can explore that a little bit in our next WAPA meeting. Sorry about my voice. It's just, it's just one of these things.
Yeah, thanks, Lonnie. April, was there anything you wanted to respond to there? Otherwise, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Lonnie brought up a great point, and I know Kevin made it in the memo, but I wanted to just highlight it here, that Carbondale is in a more unique situation than our other communities, but is not very different than the Mid-Valley Metro District, in that several or many of your lawns, residential lawns, are irrigated from ditch supplies, of which the municipality does not have control. So just that is complicated. That was different. The attention that we brought to that was very unique and a very interesting part of this project. However, we still believe that we would encourage those that are using ditch water to follow these watering standards as well. And we don't see that as a reason for not adopting what the municipality can adopt.
Okay, thanks, April. Kevin, we'd love to just have your take on this. I think it was a really thorough memo, but also just for the public, just what do you see as our next steps and concerns and parts that we might want to talk about more?
I think the next step would be really to, and April and Lonnie both did a great job. The next step in my mind is understanding what our goal would be should we choose to implement these or some form of these restrictions. And I think understanding that goal and being able to articulate it, even though it's hard, will then kind of speak to whether this is the right step or should we be taking other steps. So kind of speaking to the lack of control. Specific examples in this community, RVR. That is an HOA-wide system that is not operated by each individual house, that's operated by the HOA. So that presents challenges depending on how the system's set up of, even voluntarily complying with these rules. Hendrick Ranch is another big system that's set up similarly. Peter Grove has one. There's a lot of like community systems versus, in downtown, we're used to walking around and seeing a hose in the ditch. Obviously that's an individual system, but there's a lot of this community that is not. So that was kind of the concern that Lonnie brought up, and just specific examples help sometimes. I still go back to understanding what our goal is. And I think if we can start there and try to cipher that out, then we can look at this along with some of the other things I mentioned in the memo as, how do we achieve the goal? But if the goal is water conservation, in my mind, that I think I even said it in the memo, that's not a goal, it's a tool to achieve a goal. So what are we really trying to do?
April, I wonder if you could give us any insight on how other communities with these existing, watering schedules have dealt with some of the kinds of places that Kevin mentioned, where I'm sure we're not the only community with, some large subdivisions that have a centralized watering system that might be hard to break it up by address. Is that something that they figured out any solutions to?
I'm happy to answer the question. I just saw Lonnie's hand raised during that comment, and I wanted to see if she wanted to respond before I do.
Just to add on to what Kevin had opened up within RVR, which is a development that I'm very familiar with. Of the 530 built lots, half of them don't have control of their own irrigation timing. So that's done by the HOA, by the irrigation crew, as several houses are set in sequence. So it gets to be a little bit complicated. The other thing is that it and the golf course, the RVR golf course, are in a little mini water district. So they share an irrigation infrastructure that is controlled by the golf course. So the golf course, with use by right, they water at night so that their operation is ready to go in the morning during the summer, which leaves the HOA, the homes and the lawns, the morning and into the afternoon as the only time that those units can be irrigated. So there are some complexities, and as Kevin mentioned, there are others besides that. So these are some things that we would have to work around as we're considering universal messaging to go out to our community. That's also in line with what the other water providers in the valley are considering. I would show up here, but I'm not really fit to be seen. I don't think. Here I am. Hello. Oh,
That's fine. We totally understand.
thank you.
April, any other thoughts on how other communities with these restrictions already? I really like it that the restrictions you're talking about are, we have these case studies, right? We don't have to guess. Like, we've got partners right up the valley and communities right up the valley who've tried this for years. So how have they worked through some of those issues with similar, challenges?
Thank you. Yeah, I want to answer a couple of questions or make a couple of comments. So Kevin asked, what's our overarching goal? And that's of course up for Carbondale to decide what your overarching goal is. But for us, and I think for us, for RWAPA and for the goal of this project, or our overarching goal is to use less water, is to actually get people to go through the behavior change necessary to use less water. And so there are lots of steps in that process, right? Some of it's awareness, some of it is the desire to change, and then when you think about the tools at hand for you, we've talked about some of them will deliver on that goal better than others. But there's no one silver bullet, and there's, when we're using a precious resource, we kind of have to use all the tools at our disposal. So I see these kind of watering standards and therefore the bigger education and outreach campaign as one component of all of the things that you would want to use together to try to use less water. So that's kind of, I just wanted to say that's our common goal. The reason that we think these kind of baseline watering standards and that Carbondale should participate is to be part of the region, part of the community's message, which again is just stronger, more efficient on delivering results when we can deliver it in a broad, when we can deliver it all together, right? When we pool our resources and we spread our net wide. So those are those things. Thinking about how to handle these very special kind of but big ticket items of like these HOAs. I don't have examples of how it's been done, but I can ask for that research on the Front Range. I don't believe our community has handled that in the Roaring Fork Basin. I don't think we have any examples of anybody that's handled that well. What I would say is that I don't see these watering standards as an impediment to getting that done. I actually see them as the stepping stone to getting that done. It would be a lot easier for me as the RWAPA representative and the representative of this region to speak with the RVR HOA, for example, on how they can save water. If I point to, here's what the city is doing, does that work for you? And if that doesn't work for you, help get on to the city and our watershed's goal of saving water. How can you commit to doing that? And so it gives us kind of this jumping off point, this conversation starter of this is a common goal for our entire basin, our entire watershed. How are you going to participate? And when you approach a smaller organization with this, how are you going to be part of the common? You are part of the common problem. How are you going to be part of our solution? I just feel like you have more strength when you can show what your, examples of what your community is doing. But I would be happy and look forward to an opportunity on working on these bigger issues with these HOAs, these more complex issues, I guess I should say.
Thanks, April. Martin.
Yeah, I definitely think education is a good thing, and reaching out to all the communities in the valley is a good way to educate people. I also see that Carbondale has been very diligent about not only not being wasteful with our water, but decreasing our use of water. From 2015 to 21, 22, 23% decrease on indoor water usage. And the other one was an 8% decrease. So, I mean, we've been working diligently towards this. Do we have more work to do? No question. Our water department is to be commended for the work it's done and the work it continues to do. Our situation with the ditches are unique. And you know, we have to take that into account. I don't know if this plan really serves us well. The education component, I have no problem with, but mandatory restrictions for everyone, I really, or at least the way I see it, I don't see that as being Carbondale's answer. Now, again, you're thinking region-wide, and I understand why. That's your job, that's your function. But I don't know that this is the right answer for Carbondale.
Other thoughts at this point? I mean, like I said, I don't expect that we'll get all the way to the decision tonight, but I mean, one thing we could talk about is Kevin's question about really clarifying what is our goal. April shared what she sees the region-wide goal as, but I think we deserve to talk about that a little bit more perspective as well. Colin.
Yeah, I want to echo what Marty said. I think the regional messaging is important. And we ran into this when we talked with Kevin earlier about water. What's our goal? What are we trying to do? What quantitatively, not just, I mean, we should use less water, but I don't know that the why is really well articulated yet. And I'm not convinced that baseline standards that have even odd watering is really going to get us to where we want to go. It might, but I'd like to know more about where we're going. Like how much? Are we all trying to reduce indoor water use by 10% and outdoor water use by 20%? I don't know. How do we measure that? In our case, we use a lot of ditch water. I mean, I would think one goal is we want to leave more water in the crystal. We're not the biggest user of water in the crystal, but at least we would have some flexibility there. So I'd love to see more dialogue around what are our goals, how do those relate to the other communities' goals around water, and then see if we can do that. I'm not convinced that, at least at this time, I'm happy to learn more about the baseline standards. I just think that's, in some ways, in our case, would be a lot of busy work. And I don't know that will get us anything. So,
Well, on the education part, sorry, am I interrupting someone?
go ahead.
Go ahead.
On the education part, as I mentioned, O'Meara and Kevin and I attended the Garfield County Water Forum last week. Was it last week, Kevin? I can't remember. But anyway, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is still the 1922 compact, which, you know, could have or would have a detrimental effect on our water supply here regionally. The keynote on that day was from the Colorado River Water Conservation District, their general counsel, with an update on arguments being considered for a potential 1922 compact lawsuit should the SOI be dissatisfied with the lower basin states conservation proposals. Of course, the Secretary of the Interior has the authority to limit or turn off anybody's water supply, right? So that's something that's kind of looming over us that the experts are currently dealing with, apart from the climate change. And Mark Hamilton, please hop in if I misrepresent something, because this is a new conversation for me. But one argument is the compact's arbitrary allocation assignment based on a presumptive equitable apportionment between the upper and lower basin states versus Colorado's legally granted priority appropriation rules of water usage instituted in 1859 from the early mining divisions. Another is examining whether the lower basin's water crisis is caused by the compact or if it's a water shortage
a water storage infrastructure issue. The key in this one are the millions of acre feet lost to evaporation from Lakes Powell and Mead as they sit exposed in the desert heat and during open channel transport to the arid western states. So these are some of the, remember I said the other day, it's probably prudent to keep an eye on what's going on around us, and this is one of the biggies. And then a third more local issue would be the TMDs that feed the eastern half of Colorado and point up the need for some kind of demand management between our front range users and lower basin states. You know, despite the January snow, which in reality we need about 10 winters of in sequence to make a dent in the shortfall, we can look at our headwater region being really the bologna between two slices of stale dry bread with no lettuce or tomato as a buffer. So, you know, that's kind of what our region is looking like to the rest of the world, or the rest of the water user community. And if we pull that together as part of the educational process, and that might motivate folks to be a little bit more conscientious, because who wants to have the SOI turn our water off if they can't reach an agreement further west? Okay, I need to stop talking for a minute. Thank you.
Thanks, Lonnie. Chris, I think you were.
I guess I just feel like the education aspect of it is obviously seems to be the most palatable thing, but I do feel like keeping it simple is the key to educating people, that is our bugaboo, is this net of all these different things. And I would be a little bit dismayed if we were the stick in the mud that are the odd community out in this situation. And in terms of our goals, I mean, I think we have interior town goals, but I don't think we need to be overly selfish, or I got mine about it. And I do think the town can contribute to the larger issue here if we are willing to work with other groups, especially in sort of this educational aspects of it. And I think it's got to be simple enough for people to understand, because if they can't, I mean, I think that's where people mostly get lost, is just they don't really know, they're ignorant of what. And if it's simple and the radio can say everybody, and then, I mean, the mandatory versus voluntary, I think Marty had some good points there. But I don't know, I think this sort of soft, I could live with a sort of soft mandatory thing where it is mandatory. This is the thing we want to try to get people to program their system, and they don't even have to think about it, you know, and that just set it the way it is, but reserve enforcement to periods where people are actually seeing, you know, where the whole community is probably already maybe in a more of a mindset of maybe even talking to their neighbors about it and paying attention to it. And sort of an emergency situation, I think people will rise to the occasion if they have a real clear set of steps, like I can do this or whatever. You know, I think we do have some good things. Some of our things are ridiculous. This no tap water for restaurant customers or whatever. That seems ridiculous to me, but I'm generally in support of, I think we should continue exploring this for sure. I think there are a lot of tricky things to work out for sure. And there are obviously our own town goals, but I think it's okay for us to just share in the goal of the group of this larger entity and the basin as a whole, and to be able to defend ourselves from this two sides of the stale bread, as that we are doing something to do our part to trying to be part of the solution that, this is obviously the tragedy of the commons or whatever, where everybody says, I got mine, and that everybody loses in that situation essentially. So I guess I do think, yes, it's more exploration, but I wouldn't be quick to dismiss this chance for us to try to all get on more of the same page and give people a little bit of a clearer message, and just make it something that can go out kind of as a region-wide thing, and media can get a simple answer on things, I guess.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, I see a lot of comments and I want to make sure Lauren has a chance because she hasn't weighed in yet. And I think as we've got about 10 more minutes on this topic, let's start to think about what other information would we need in order to move this discussion forward in another meeting where we probably don't have a whole hour. So I'll start with Lauren and see Lonnie and sorry, Marty and Colin as well.
Thank you, Ben. I just wanted to ask a question really of the board, food for thought. Don't really have anything pertinent to add between, April and Kevin and Mark. There's a lot of data there and there's a lot of knowledge about our system, but a concern that came up, particularly when April was first talking about these watering restrictions at the beginning of the meeting. And this is a policy question for the board sort of to ask yourselves. This is being asked, the town is being asked to regulate something, to put something in the code with regard to watering restrictions, and yet really have no intention of enforcing it. And I'm not sure how the board feels about, regulating when we are stating out loud, we're not going to enforce this. This is for educational purposes. I'm not sure, obviously I haven't been here that long, but that we ever regulate to educate in Carbondale as opposed to regulate to have some kind of teeth and be able to enforce for violations. Just food for thought.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Marty.
I'll be quick. I agree with you on a lot of what you said, Chris. I disagree on one thing, the tap water for restaurant users. Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is, you could be sitting down $100 plate dinner. You do not get tap water. They ask you if you want still or sparkling. You can ask for tap water and they'll give it to you. You save the water. It creates a consciousness of saving water. That's what I mean by education. It saves washing the glass. So that's one thing. I agree with Lauren. She didn't say it, but I'm not comfortable putting something in code that we're not going to enforce. My problem with that is what happens, like in the past, when we have an emergency and had drought restrictions and went to alternate day watering. Then the public was much more responsive to meet the needs. They saw it as an emergency and something they can impact. And when I speak about the education, maybe we need to educate the whole valley, the whole western region on the nature of the problem with water. All the development in Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Southern California that's gone on for the last 20 years without any thought of where that water was going to come from. Well, that's now at all of our doors. So I'm aware of the problem. I think we need to do a better job of educating the public of the problem. And I'll leave it at that. I don't have an answer. And I think we need to give this more consideration, but I don't want to do something just to feel good about it. I like to be part of the total community, but I have to understand what Carbondale has to benefit from that.
I guess going to that emergency thing, I guess it'd be interesting to get some data of like, is that our goal though? Are we trying to, the town, that would be our acute goal, is to save our water supply or whatever in a situation where we feel like we're in a drought situation, but we're in a long-term drought situation as well that would benefit from a year-round reduction in water use. I would assume would be putting more water into the system on a longer term basis. And in that situation, you may be ameliorating those emergency situations, hopefully, and not have to go to those emergency situations as much. That would be my pushback on that, I guess, a little bit. And then on the enforcement and the mandatory thing, that's a really good point, Lauren. I think that's something to talk about, but there's a lot of things that we have codes for and that in practicality, we don't necessarily do a great job of enforcing. Bear proof trash cans, all over town, not bear proof cans. I mean, that's mandatory theoretically, but we don't enforce that. So I think that's a little bit of a straw man to some degree. I think it would be something where if it's a situation where we really care about it, then yes, we do go out and enforce it. And maybe Ruapa has grant funding to have somebody tool around and help us with that or something. But I'm still if we can get more data about what the other towns, if that shows that they've really been able to, that they've done better than us.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
I just wanted to reinforce that my skepticism doesn't mean I'm not supportive of what Ruapa is doing. And I like the regional conversation. I think there's a lot to be gained by valley-wide education. I think we need to do a better job about why what Lonnie said was really useful. A lot of people don't get that. And I'm not sure the regulations and the education are connected. They're not mutually exclusive. I mean, I think we could do one without the other. I'm open to the idea. I think there's some concerns about doing that, but it's worth some additional conversations. This isn't the end, as you said, and a great beginning for other conversations.
Kevin, anything else you want to add before we start to, I'll share some thoughts and I think we'll share any ideas on what we'd like to see in the future meeting, but you've been very, very quiet there. You was a really thorough memo. Anything else you'd like to share in this meeting?
I'd like to hear what information would be helpful.
Okay. I mean, my perspective on this is probably closest to Chris's, I think, from what I've heard of the board so far. I'd like us to be part of this. I'd like us to get to yes somehow on a valley-wide effort. I appreciate the effort that's gone into it and the fact that we're basing it on communities within our same watershed and our same valley that have had these in place. I think as far as goals, I know the idea of like leaving water in the system is sort of nebulous, and we could talk about, well, what happens to that water if it's left in the system? Does it really help the fish, or is it diverted in the next ditch? But I think some of April's points about leading by example rather than finger pointing at the other places that are using water, I think it resonates with me. I think Carbondale has a long history of, we didn't have to ban plastic bags. We knew that wasn't going to change the world, but we said this is the right thing to do, so we're going to do it. And what do you know, a few years later, there's a state law, and we didn't have to put solar panels and renewable energy standards in place before it was commonplace, but we did. And Carbondale has sort of flown that flag of being a leader on issues related to using resources efficiently and being as gentle on our natural environment and resources as we can be. And a lot of people have asked us, as long as I've been on the board and involved in town, what are we doing about water conservation? And it's hard to point to anything. So that doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. I know that we had some things, we have a tiered rate structure, we have water tap fees, all those things that help. But I think this would be something tangible. So I'd like to discuss it more. I'd like to, I think the enforcement issue is a big question. I could see maybe in the code even saying these are recommendations in normal times, but at stage 1 or whatever, first stage of drought restrictions, that's when enforcement happens. But getting people into that habit, being part of the valley-wide messaging, I could see that that being valuable. I also think as far as goals, and I know Mark O'Meara is there. I appreciate you being here, Mark. And Kevin, we talked about this before, but I hope that we're able to, rather than continue to spend money on expanding our infrastructure for more supply, that at some point we're able to reduce demand. And I know that we talked about that, and I understand a lot of supply is for redundancy in times of drought and things like that. So I do get that. But we are a growing town. And I think that reducing water where we can just makes sense on a lot of those levels. So I understand Kevin's point that water reduction itself is a tool. I agree with you. It's not sort of an end goal. And I think it's the same with like energy efficiency. It's a tool to address climate change or, you know, diminishing supplies of fossil fuels or whatever. And I think with water, I think of it as the goal being, you know, potentially less investment in future infrastructure, as well as more water available for other needs when it seems like it's being, you know, used inefficiently or wasted in overwatering. So exactly how it gets to those other needs and all that, I don't really know. Seems definitely some more to learn there. As far as next steps, I mean, I think maybe sometime in February we could follow up on this. Lauren and I can look at agendas. Things that I'd like to have as part of that discussion, and I'd love to hear from everybody, is any examples of how other communities up valley with existing watering schedules have dealt with HOAs and kind of the complications there of when you're not in control of exactly when you water. I'd love a little bit more detailed goal, I think, from RWAPA, if we could get that. That's kind of in writing, like this is the real goal of this beyond just education and outreach. What else would others like? And I guess just more thought on the enforcement and what that might look like if we put something in the code and said it's encouraged at all times, it's enforced at these times, if that would be feasible. And maybe it would say it's enforced based on, you know, our capacity to enforce it, which would then probably depend on RWAPA and the grant and enforcement agents and that sort of thing. Because I know we don't want to flood our inboxes with complaints from neighbors saying somebody's water. Okay, that's not cool. So what else would we like to have at a future discussion?
I'd be also very interested in have any of the other communities implemented changes in plants that they're using, some water-wise kind of approaches to landscaping. We've talked to Kevin about this potentially a pilot that we would explore. So at the same time that we're trying to educate people about reducing their water use, we're also implementing landscapes that don't need as much water in public spaces. So I'd be really interested to know if anybody's doing that.
There's some work going on in the environmental board on that. They're working on a plant list, recommended plant list.
Awesome.
Which hopefully, I don't know how long that takes, but hopefully, I think there was some dream that it would be able to get rolled out at Dandelion Day or something as education. So yeah, there's a whole subcommittee working. So.
And I agree too with like a lot of the points in Kevin's memo that there are likely other things that would have a bigger impact, and this is a first step, not a last step. So I think that whether it's the turf buyback or changes to the UDC or whatever it might be.
And then the other thing would be, do the other communities have water goals? Water reduction goals, do they have per capita goals or anything like that? We talked about having that, and we kind of know what they are, but I don't think we've adopted anything like that. So it's just be interesting.
And I think we do have something that would be worth digging out in that 2015 municipal water efficiency plan. I found that at some point and I read it and it did state, I think, the reduction goal. So that'd be good to refresh. Marty, what else?
Yeah, I'd like us to philosophically keep in the back of our mind that we want to give an outside agency the right to provide enforcement on Cloverdale citizens. That's a very important point. I mean, do you want to do that? That's what you're doing here. You're saying they can go after grant money to provide enforcement.
So more discussion about how that would work. what that would-
Yeah, no, philosophically, I think you need to think about that.
Yeah.
Is that something you want, or you think the residents of Carbondale want? I think they'd be very leery of it. But that's just my opinion. I think we need to get more research on that.
Yeah, so maybe that would be something else we could ask from Milwaukee, is just a little bit more detail on what enforcement region-wide might look like.
I don't want to do something just to feel good. You know, that's why I want the emphasis on education. We've been educated. We've been looking at this for years. And Mark O'Mara and Kevin have done an awesome job to get us to where we're at. We're not across the goal line. I agree. But I would rather see constructive steps to get us to the goal line.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Chris, anything else you'd like to see from staff or from Milwaukee, or just as a focus point for our next discussion?
Thank you guys. I think your list is pretty good.
Okay. Lonnie, any final thoughts or next steps, things you'd like to see in a future discussion?
Yeah, the same thing that you guys have all pointed up. I would like to see what the other jurisdictions feel reasonable to implement, and then what approach is most effective to take for this type of thing. And then really, build something around that so that it is a more unified message that we can point to if asked the other participants in the program, so that folks understand that this is a regional effort to, curb water use and be more responsible with that resource. So that would be the key thing for me, is to see what everybody else, what their takeaway was, maybe what some of the hard ones were that they see as being obstacles. And then, more so what a successful approach to messaging this to the communities would be.
Thanks, Lonnie. April, any closing thoughts for us?
Thank you for this great discussion. It's been really helpful for me to hear all of your thoughts on it and your questions that are outstanding. I'll work with Kevin and Mark to make sure that we get some answers provided to you in the time frame that you would like. I made notes of all of the questions that you all had, so I really appreciate it. And I just also want to commend Mark and Kevin for all of the work that they've done towards water reductions, reductions in demands and water savings. And for the memo that Kevin wrote for you all tonight was very in-depth, outstanding memo. So thanks for always participating and for continuing to take hard steps to doing the right thing. I really appreciate it. And I think the Carbondale community is an outstanding one. So I'm excited to be working with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One real quick question. And if knows the answer, that's fine. Would it be helpful at the next meeting to just talk a little bit more about the Colorado River system, hydrology of the area, things like that, to maybe get a better feel for if this cup of water bypasses Carbondale? And the intent of this is not to go in, because I agree with April, it's not a finger pointing exercise, but what could potentially happen to it once it's here? Because I don't know, it seems to me like that might help kind of refine these goals a little bit. I don't know.
I think that would be helpful. I mean, I think if we polled the community and said, what's your number one goal with water conservation? They would probably say something along the lines of more water in the crystal for the fish, right? Like right in our stretch right here, that's what's visible to us and we see it dry out. And less about more water for downstream users in other states. So I think maybe honing in on some of that, like to what degree would our water conservation help achieve any of those goals, and what would potentially happen to that downstream. I think that could be helpful. And then the other things that I heard, just to make sure we're on the same page, are any examples of how HOAs and other kind of managed water systems in our Up Valley communities have handled the watering schedule in their community. A clearer goal on water conservation from RWAPA. Any evidence that the water schedule is resulting in savings in those communities, and then details about enforcement, and how that might work, if it was done at a regional scale. I think Catherine probably mentioned examples of other water conservation measures. I kind of feel like that might be the next phase of discussion, you know, like I think for now, let's try to keep focused on, do we want to adopt this region-wide plan? And then what else do we want to do? Like whether we adopt this or not, I think we're going to have other conversations about other things that we can do. But I think for now, we're probably pretty focused on this proposition. Okay, thanks, April. Thanks, Kevin, and everybody for that. That's how the city is supposed to be, right?
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You want to take 5?
Sure. I think that's a good call. Yeah, let's take 5 and we'll have back on.
Thanks. I drank too much water.
Sort of is.
Oh, he's tapping his leg.
Try to give them a connection that you want to. Nice to meet you.
Good. Thank you.
Louise, take that. He said he had a family.
Thank you, Kevin.
He's so nice, Kevin. When are you gonna celebrate your birthday?
I don't know. Kathy wants to know where I want to go to eat tomorrow night.
Oh,
I don't know. I have to work tomorrow.
we're celebrating Patrick's on Friday.
Yeah,
Where are you going?
I don't know.
Home is the best place to be, man.
I said, "You want to cook a steak for me?" And then she goes, "No, I want to go out."
Yeah, and I'm not a big,
What you make?
so we have, I won't eat it, but we had this ribeye. He got like 3 ribeyes at Costco for New Year's, so I'm like, there's a ribeye down there. He's like, oh. And then we have some shrimp, so I'll do a little surf and turf. Yeah,
What time should I be
that's
over?
why I'm retiring. I don't go out to eat. Yeah. So, yeah. No, I'm not I'm not photogenic, no.
Yes. The entire page.
Yeah. What'd you say?
He's begging you. Get up and let him
No,
take a
I'm not,
picture.
I don't photograph well. I
Just
really
take it, you know what, Raleigh, just take a picture with her, all her papers, and I'm in my computer all the way.
Yeah, you got a telephoto lens on there. Face full of zits.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'll try to-
Hopefully Jessica will have some.
Bring the gas on.
Yep. Either.
No more what?
What?
Boston.
Yes. Yep.
They were all looking at those books. Like, don't forget, write her email. It's very upset.
Will do.
85% of that water is headed back to the Roy. We'll put that on the.
Touche.
I'm gonna miss hear that. I'm gonna have to tell him that one in the morning.
That was actually probably mostly transported from Aspen. Maybe you
Oh, so that's all the better. We're bringing water into our system.
Oh, that was good.
You can't have fun with it, is it right?
Exactly.
About short-term rentals that weren't licensed. No, you should get on that. When?
It's today, Tuesday, Thursday. She called, he came in. He might have come in Friday morning.
All right, we'll call the meeting back to order and talk about ordinance number 1, series of 2023. Finally getting the ordinance before the end of June. Christie.
Yeah, we can, well, Lauren and myself and, Mark have been all working on this pretty hard. Thank you, Mark, for, drafting the ordinance. It's actually fairly simple, as it turns out. You know, the voters passed this. We want to make sure to codify it and that we've got everything kind of on the books the way that we're going to administer it. I don't know if this is on or not. Can you hear me okay?
Does it have a red light?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just codifying how we're gonna administer it and making sure that we've got all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. Pretty easy, really.
Good, thanks. And maybe Mark or Lauren, somebody can just tell us a little bit about the dates and how that's working out. I know that this is unusual, right? Usually a tax, you can put it in place whatever day and everything after that collects, but because some things were already booked and there's been delay, tell us a little bit about the dates and how we're dealing with that.
Sure. We have, you know, it's going to make a difference whether an Airbnb or a VRBO or an Avalara, I think that's the name of the company, Avalara, is managing the rental or the booking, because those companies have systems in place to be able to collect that tax and remit it. The mom and pops who are managing their own might be a little bit different and might be a little slower to get up to speed. What we did in this ordinance is we, partly because of that and partly because we're still working with our software provider to make sure that our form is in place and that when people submit the tax, it's we're ready for it. We have this put down as I believe for the April payment.
Yeah, April 1 for May, you know.
Right. And then what will happen is, and we're not really going to be able to figure this out in order to enforce it, but anything that was booked prior to January 1st will not owe the tax because the tax wasn't in place then. And then, so we may have really no reliable data for maybe a couple of quarters. And then we'll start, number one, being able to get whatever enforcement we're doing of the short-term rental, the original ordinance that said people had to be licensed. And also, once people get used to this system and that the systems that they have in place to take reservations, we'll just collect the tax automatically and get them filed with us.
Somebody asks us about this. The answer, it sounds like, is if something was booked before January 1st, then even if the stay is not until this summer, no additional tax applies. But if it's booked after January 1st, they should collect the tax.
Mm-hmm.
What about anything being rented between January 1st and April, whatever it is?
They should still be collecting the tax.
Okay.
There's not going to be a whole lot of opportunity for us to check that, but they still should be collecting the tax. And then any taxes that were collected prior to April 1st will just be due with that first payment.
Okay, so it's really bookings as of January 1st, 2023.
That's correct. Because that's when the system, the software program, Airbnb or what have you, tells you what you owe. and sets that up for you, even if you haven't paid it all in full, if you just have a 50% deposit or what have you, that's all in their system already for this is the cost, this is the housekeeping and the lodging tax, et cetera.
Some of the proprietors of short-term rentals, when they came to the meeting when we discussed this, was that would they have to impose an additional tax on people who had already booked based on the current
Right.
cost at that time? And I'm glad that, I appreciate that you all worked hard to.
May not avoid all of it, but we talked about the ski season and kind of mud season, and then it'd be a good time to transition that way as well. So it gives the chance for everybody who booked in November to be here now. You know,
So it'll be less of an issue pretty much, because like if somebody booked in December for August, you know, they're still gonna have to collect starting in April. So there's still gonna be some of that,
Okay.
you know.
doesn't totally avoid it, but it does.
Other questions, comments?
Quick comment.
Yeah.
Thank you, both of you. It shows a lot of thought went into this to try to eliminate potential problems down the road. I mean, I know we won't get everything right off the bat. There are some loopholes people can skate through, but you know, those loopholes aren't going to be there forever.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Marty, and it's another one, it's kind of like the tobacco tax, where we didn't really pass it to raise the revenue. That's a nice benefit. We passed it to say, there's an impact to the community of these uses and discourage it a little bit, and on the side, raise revenue to deal with those impacts. So it might not be as big a number in the first year as.
And people, it's gonna be fairly seamless for those that are already collecting, most everybody really. Because they're just gonna be collecting through many units. It's just another form. It will be an additional form. There's additional administrative costs associated with that, but it'll be fairly painless. Except for of course, the money, but
But it isn't their money.
that's right.
It's additional money that's coming from the renter. Correct? If they do it correctly. And if they don't, that's their problem.
Other questions, comments?
Giving everybody who's gonna be dealing with this a lot of time to kind of figure things out, so I think that's great. Thank you.
And we'll be getting a service announcement out there in the next week or so. We can we're gonna be thoughtful about how we do that and making sure we get all the appropriate people in that loop, so.
Christie's also developing a series of frequently asked questions that will also include the short-term rental tax and the bag fee. So, and that will be prominently on the website, and we will put out a PSA about where to find it.
Well, if there's not any more discussion, I would entertain a motion for ordinance number.
I'd move to approve ordinance number 1, series of 2023 to be effective April 1, 2023.
Second.
A motion by Colin, second by Marty. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Bonnie, is that an aye? I think so. Any opposed?
Aye.
That's a painful aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Votings. All right, thank you for that one. Move on
Thank
to
you,
next one.
Christy.
Probably pretty similar. I don't know if you're involved in the next one as well. With bag tax probably. Okay. I think this will be a little bit more discussion, and I would just frame this also to say, if we can't get all the way to passing this one tonight, kind of like the water discussion, I think there's going to be some interest from the community in this, and maybe tonight's discussion will help raise awareness, and we might schedule a follow-up.
So, as you all are very well aware, in 2012, I believe, Carbondale passed a plastic bag ban and bag fee ordinance, as is Carbondale's way, and you mentioned it earlier, to lead the charge, Ben. Now the state has followed up with a statewide bag fee. It's a little different than what we have in place, and some of the definitions and rules are different, but now we have this state requirement, the state regulation, which doesn't quite match the regulation that we have So the purpose of this ordinance is to reconcile our regulation with the new state guidelines and law. There are a lot of towns in Carbondale that have in the last 10 years put bag fees in place, and so they're all sort of doing the same thing. So it's really fairly simple because we are used to having a bag fee. However, who is liable to pay that bag fee and, or file and pay that bag fee, and who, which businesses are affected by this, are very different. So what this ordinance does is it includes the city market that we had before. And in the first part of the ordinance, it's where it talks about, there's a section about grocers. That's how we defined city market earlier. It's the only business that's defined as a grocer under that definition. So we left that in there, but we also had it sunset automatically when the other stores came into line on January 1st of 2024, so that they would all be in the same paragraph. The big difference here is that the state law defines stores and small stores differently. And so under that definition, City Market would be a store, Ace Hardware would be a store, 7-Eleven would be a store, but Lulu Bells or the co-op would be classified as a small store and would be exempted from the state law under their definitions. When I was writing this, looking at how they're defining these things, I made some assumptions that you may very well dissuade me of. And one of those things was that most probably Carbondale and you as board members would not want to say that, for example, 7-Eleven could not use plastic bags and would have to pay a bag tax, but Soper Slickers wouldn't have to. Or Ace Hardware, or potentially Builders First, or, I mean, there's, you know, the differences between, you know, Garcia's Market and Lulu Bells and, you know, all of those things. Some of them are defined as stores and some of them are defined as small stores under the state definition. In this draft ordinance, we included all of those under the regulation. The state law also calls for a 10-cent bag fee. We left it at our home rule 20 cents. We did not make a delineation between, you know, City Market paying 20 cents and everybody else paying 10. So those things are different about this regulation. We did follow along with the state regulation that said that stores and small stores could be grandfathered up until January of 2024, and they could still use plastic or paper bags, but that they would be liable for the bag fee during that period of time. Figuring that at least some of these stores would have plastic bags already in their inventory, and, you know, to give them a sort of let's get used to these new regulations period of time. This is another thing that we don't have to create a completely new form in Muni Revs for actually collecting the fee, but our form needs to have some modifications to it, which Christie's working on, just to delineate the differences, like the 4 cents that the stores are allowed to to hold back. Even though they don't have to, they can submit the whole 20 cents if they'd like. So that's really the big question for you as a board is who's going to be included in this in Carbondale? And how are we delineating between some of these smaller businesses?
So that's summary.
Mark, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, just, I think everybody knows this, but maybe I'll state the obvious, which is that the state law is basically set up as a floor. Meaning it applies statewide and we could make some arguments perhaps in the country, but basically it's written that the legislature is saying, you can be more strict than this, but don't be more lax. So with the small store issue, like, it qualifies as a small store under state law and therefore is exempt under state law. But under local ordinance, we can be more strict. So if you'd like to bring in, so I don't need to target people, but you know what I mean. The stores that are not national franchises, but are nonetheless using bags from Carbondale, those come to mind. But there's lots of others. I think you counted roughly 22 or something like that. That is your option. This was a bit of a mouthful to try to reconcile our existing ordinance with the new terminology in the state law, and so I think having lots of discussion is good. We may or may not catch additional ambiguities and clarifications as we work through this, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. Whether and so, for instance, like this template of keeping the 20% with 4 cents going to the state is a solution that Steamboat used, and we thought that made sense. But if you wanted to go to 25 cents, so there'd still be a full 21 cents coming to the town, that's legally doable too, because it's more strict state law. So anything more than 10 cents applied to large, not large stores, but stores which accept small stores. That makes sense?
Can I just correct something that you said?
Yep.
The 4 cents doesn't go to the state. They are able to withhold it. They're able to hold it back to help pay for some of their administrative costs and education and everything else.
So is the
Sure.
state getting anything of
Nope.
that 10 cents?
No,
Okay, we get 6 cents and the store gets 4 cents for administration.
My point was town was.
Right.
right. I just didn't want it to get more confusing.
So is the state, is that, assuming that towns are just gonna get, this is sort of a freebie for towns in some ways.
Well, the state's statewide in
Yeah.
all areas, big and small.
And one other thing that you should probably be aware of, that we've come to be aware of just since the law was effective at the beginning of January, is that it's completely up to the store whether or not they want to give a bag out. I have been told about 2 different stores. I mean, Mana Foods has done this for a long time, but that if you ask them for a bag, they will say, there's a pile of cardboard boxes over there. Go if you want one, but we don't do bags anymore. And so if the store doesn't want to pay the bag fee, they don't have to. They don't have to collect it from the customer and they don't have to pay it to the town. That would be a little bit harder in the grocery store. Yeah.
And boxes are not part of this.
Nope.
Let's continue with clarifying questions before we get into discussing what we think it should be. Make sure we're all clear.
You had said something, and this isn't clear in my mind. So some businesses are exempt to January 1st, 24, so they can use up supplies, or they still have to charge the tax?
No, they still have to charge, it's not a tax.
The fee.
Thank you.
Fee, okay.
Like, whoa. They still have to charge the fee, but they can continue to use plastic bags. Right? There's not a ban on them until the end of the year.
Okay, so they could use up their inventory, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
And, but the other thing is that some stores under the state law are completely exempt and they can continue to use plastic bags and not pay the fee.
Okay.
But only in Carbondale, if that's the way we want to go.
Ben, I'm gonna throw a complete curveball, because personally, I think we should raise the fee to 25 cents. It hasn't been raised since it was implemented. And what year was that?
2012.
2012, so in 10 years, 11 years. That's a minor adjustment. The money goes towards the e-board, it goes towards their waste days, I believe.
Use it for whatever waste diversion project.
You know, it's a very worthwhile cause.
It's shrinking, by the way. It's supposed to shrink. It's a syntax. I mean,
Yeah, well,
basically, it's
no.
a fee, but the point was to try to change people's behavior.
And keep the residents in town, or the people shop regularly in town, because the people from Marlboro and Redstone that go to City Market and
Mhm.
shop, they know to bring their own bags. Okay? The tourists, the people just passing through town, they gripe about 20 cents, they're gonna gripe about 25 cents. They're not gonna gripe more, they're just gonna gripe. So in an effort, I know the e-board does not always feel that I'm their strongest supporter, but I think it's a well-deserved source of funds for them that I don't think is materially gonna change someone's lifestyle.
So Marty has a proposal that we increase the fee. Let's keep going with the clarifying questions and then get into.
Okay,
Yeah, I can't find it. Mark. How are small stores defined?
that's my question.
Like, how is the color?
We are prepared to answer that.
Small store means a store that operates solely in Colorado, has 3 or fewer locations in the state, and is not part of a franchise, corporation, or partnership that has physical locations outside of Colorado.
So it's got nothing to do with the size of the store.
No.
Mm-mm.
And how many.
And we
people
talked about
they-
that. That was very good. We talked about maybe how small is not the word we
Kind of
should
a
have.
on top, but it's
Yeah.
A local business really is a better.
It's
Right.
small in terms of geographic reach, not.
Oh,
sort of-
okay, okay.
Other clarifying questions?
Well, no, I was just thinking that I would think it might be wise to us to create a size category. Like a Lulu Bell is pretty small. Co-op is a big place. They sell a lot of product. So just about, yeah.
And I think Marty and I were both here. I don't know if anybody else was, when we discussed this a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, and we discussed expanding it. And we looked at going different sizes, and we actually got a lot of pushback. It was sort of a last minute retreat on our part, where we were almost ready, and then the owners of a few of the larger impacted stores came in and gave us a lot of reasons why they didn't think that it should apply to them, and they were doing a lot of this anyway, and we sort of backed off. And then with COVID, there was like plastic everywhere. And now with the states, forcing our hand essentially.
Mhm.
Because if we decided to sort of do nothing, then the state's 10-cent law would go into effect everywhere except City Market, and it would exempt small stores and retail food.
Not necessarily, well, retail, you mean restaurants?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's one that we haven't talked about, but it
Yeah.
does say in the state law that retail food, which is a restaurant, and it
Right.
defines it as not a convenience store, not a grocer.
They're
are not
exempt.
included, and I'm not clear on whether they're included in our proposed ordinance or not.
They're not. We didn't deal with restaurants at all.
So somewhere like the carniceria, tortilleria, I mean, they would be a retail food establishment. By this definition, prepares or serves food in individual portions for immediate on or off premises consumption, and is not a grocery store or convenience store, although they might be right on that.
They might be on that edge.
Yeah, so we would need maybe some guidance from the state.
Mhm.
So our proposal is to exempt retail food, but not exempt the sort of mom and pop local small store category.
Yes.
And we could change that. We could say retail food needs to be in.
We just can't do something more relaxed than what the.
Right.
Do you recall the arguments made by those people who came in on the last minute? Are there any really convincing?
I mean, at that point, it was really that they were already doing the things that we were hoping that they would do. It was mostly the owner of Ace Hardware and of Soper's Liquor and Wine, talking about the fact that they had already gone to pretty much all boxes, and that they had reasons sometimes, like at a liquor store, to give somebody a bag to carry their booze in, and that they didn't really want sort of the administrative burden of it. They didn't feel like it would have an impact.
Well, and to that point, that you just made the illustration, because Ace Hardware would be subject to this under the state law, but Sopris Liquors would not,
Because,
So-
because they're
be-
franchising.
because they're a franchise. Or a, Ace Hardware is corporation located.
Isn't co-op a true value or something?
Seems so strange, that that's the.
That's a franchise.
That's possible. I didn't know that.
Keep it so like Bonnie can hear and for the minutes.
Yep.
So it sounds like Marty's raised a proposal on the amount. I might table it for just a moment. It seems like and again, I think what we should do tonight is come out with, here's our proposal. I think we should
Mhm.
publicize it widely, and then I
Yep.
think we should have another meeting, and I think that we'll have a few local business owners show up, and then we'd be ready to make sure that their voices were heard. I think we should talk mostly really about is it all stores except retail food as currently proposed by staff? Or do we want to go with the small store exemption or some other size-based exemption as Colin wondered about? The state exempts some of the mom and pop local businesses and we don't.
So retail food was restaurants?
Yeah, it'd be like, Fat Thai could still, they don't use plastic, but if they wanted to, or if they don't want to charge you for a bag because you're getting
The
takeout.
smithy. Don't it?
That's such a
Mhm.
strange term for it. Retail food sounds like a grocery store.
But it does say this in their definition, retail food is not a grocery store.
Yeah, I don't know who drafted this, but.
Does anybody think we should include restaurants, retail food? It doesn't seem like.
No.
It's like a necessity. You can't really walk out with your food.
Well, it's in a box
Bring it
though,
back.
isn't it?
What's that, Lonnie?
It's in a to-go box though, right? The takeout food that you get at the restaurants.
Well, it depends. Everybody does it differently.
Is it the plastic? Is it all bags or is it just plastic?
It's that plastic would be banned in here. And in the meantime and forever, all bags would have a fee.
Okay.
So plastic's got like this year to get rid of your plastic supplies. I'm inclined to stick with the state guidance on excluding retail food. For now, we can always make it more strict later. I'm inclined to stick basically as close to the state as we can. What about, staff's recommendation is that we include the small kind of mom and pops. The state law says we don't have to, we could exclude them. I'm inclined to follow staff's recommendation.
You say include them or exclude them? Staff.
We put them in the ordinance so that this would be effective as to them.
Everybody except restaurants would have to charge a fee for a bag and couldn't use plastic after January 1st, 2020. That would be it.
Well, that seems like the most straightforward as
Can
I'm hearing this.
I just read something really quick, Ben? And it's in the memo, but we had to go over it again today, so I want to make a point of it. The other thing is that the state law applies to farmers markets, so that's going to be interesting to put into place. However, it says it applies to a grocery store, supermarket, convenience store, liquor store, dry cleaner, pharmacy, drugstore, clothing store, or other type of retail establishment at which carryout bags are traditionally provided to customers. So that's also a little bit fuzzy, but when Christy and I were going through our sales tax payers today and really talking about, well, is this the kind of business that traditionally gives out bags to its customers? There are a bunch of beauty salons and they sell shampoo but they don't generally give you bags. That's not a common thing. So we were trying to figure out like who's in and who's out if we put the small stores in. And I'm not sure it really would apply to that many. It's really the ones that traditionally would provide a bag. And then there's no requirement for them to do so if they want to provide a box or, nothing at all, just say, bring your own.
I think as part of your outreach, it would be useful or as part of if we do, want to put this out for public I think, definitely like the tortilleria and Garcia's, those are places I have encountered a lot of plastic
Mhm.
in the past, and so they might be, especially affected by this. It'd be good to be on them.
How do you distinguish though? If I go in to get a burrito, they give me a plastic bag.
And are they a restaurant or are they?
Right, and they have tables to sit down at,
And they have groceries.
and they have groceries,
And a bunch of others.
and not only them. The connoisseuria, the tortilleria,
Yeah.
and let's take the Cowan Center. They sell food. They sell food to take out. They have a couple tables. You could sit down, but they're a convenience store.
They are a convenience store, so they would not be a restaurant.
Right.
And the same thing with Garcia's. They're a market. They would
Okay.
not be a restaurant.
And they're not in the town limits, so that'll be.
True,
Yeah.
that's true.
So we won't go there.
Right.
Bag from that will be getting.
Yeah.
But we'll have-
Mhm.
What's
If, depending on whether or not they are exempted as a small store.
Oh, right.
Right.
They would be, that would be it, they would be exempted as.
This is already in effect. I mean, if you go
Mhm.
to City Market in Glenwood, which never charged for bags before, they took away all their plastic bags. And they are charging for brown paper bags.
What does enforcement look like? Do we have any idea, like, from the state? Like, if we were just under the state law, what would it look like? And if not,
It's on us.
okay.
There's enforcement. There's, fines and fees and basically the same thing that we're already doing.
It's just
But-
easy because it's one place right now and everybody goes there every day. So it's really
Well,
obvious if they're-
And like anything else, our enforcement generally of our code is complaint based.
Any thoughts on the small store? Follow the state or follow the staff recommendation? State lets them do whatever they want. The local recommendation is to include them in the restrictions.
I would follow staff recommendation.
Okay.
I think it's, more amenable to promoting our culture here, which is, part of what this is all about, right? I mean, that's why we started this in 2012. It's our culture to be environmentally responsible. And so we'll stay on track with that and follow staff recommendation. And then when 24 comes around, we'll see what happens next with the remaining people who use leftover plastic bags. So that seems fairly straightforward to me, unless I'm missing something.
And a lot of your thing is kind of about this Soper's liquor versus Ace sort of feeling arbitrarily divided.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's more consistent. Okay, so it sounds like we're leaning toward accepting the staff recommendation as is. We're not proposing any changes. Other than Marty proposed a fee increase. I'd say I'm inclined to keep it at the 20-cent recommendation for now because we are expanding the scope of this and it feels, 20 cents just, I agree with you. It's not much. It's not as much as it was 10 years ago. But it's double what the state requires us to do. And I think if we're saying like to small mom and pop stores, hey, we're gonna put this burden on you. I think I'd rather start a little smaller and less of a sting, but if others feel differently, if you think a quarter is the right way to go, we can certainly do that. I don't think it's gonna be too big of a deal anymore.
I know. I'm glad it's being expanded.
I guess, if we're gonna come back to it. I could go either way. I would.
We could kick it down the road. I mean, we're not gonna approve it or disapprove it now, right? That's what you're saying? You wanna have a public discussion? I'd like to see that be part of the public discussion.
Okay.
Okay,
I
appreciate
hear
it.
that what we're promoting is outreach is, here's the staff recommendation. Come and tell us what you think. We'll also discuss the fee.
I just think we've kicked it down the road before. 4 years ago, I believe it was. And I just think, again, the money is being put to good environmental use. Those things don't pay for themselves and the town doesn't pay.
And can staff explain all the dates to us really clearly? Because I see. If the date that we pass it, then it would take effect, it says April 1st. If we
For
pass it
collection, yeah.
today. But then I see something about July 1st, 2024 in there also, and the state law has a January 1st. 2024. So can you just kind of lay out the timeline?
So, let me just remind myself here.
And the grocer, just so I'm not trying to put it on the spot, I see on, it's page 108 of our packet, but it's the grocer category, is the definition of grocer shall sunset and be in no further force in effect after July 1st, 2024. And then it goes into prior to July 1st, 2024, so I just don't know.
it's because that's when everything's just gonna become under that one paragraph. A grocer will become a store because they're a store under the state definition, but our current ordinance calls them a grocer, and they're already banned from using plastic bags. Whereas the other stores and small stores have a window of time. We put until January of, well, prior to December 31st, 2023, a store, including a small store, can still use paper or plastic bags. This may be actually an oversight, because what else is in the state law that I didn't put in here, and I can certainly put it back if the board wants me to, is that in the state law, it says between January and July of 2024, anyone who still has plastic bags in their inventory can continue to use them.
But has
That-
to pay the fee.
But they still have to pay the fee. That didn't make sense to me, because if they can't use up all their plastic bags between now and December 31st, I just had this vision of somebody going out and buying 5,000 plastic bags on December 15th and then continuing to use them for another 6 months. And I didn't think the board would want that. So I left that particular line out of this, and I just had it end at December 31st, 2023. After that, no more plastic bags for any of these definitions.
So why do we need July? Maybe
We don't need July. I think we could do it January 1st.
Until through December 31st.
Right. I think that date just got left in there because I brought it over from the state.
Okay. and that's in that
Regulation.
Section 7.
I didn't catch it.
It's in there. Next page.
Yep.
So let's get that cleaned up. I think the fewer dates, the better. The effective date, April 1 was intended.
Yes.
Possibly, you have another meeting by the time we pass it.
April Fools.
Okay.
But I mean, we still have the 20 cent on all bag is gonna be starting January 1st, so they still can collect. It's just that we're not gonna really enforce them.
Okay. So technically, they should be collecting right now, but they should be collecting the states.
The 10, yeah.
Okay. So ours would be effective April 1st, 2023. Whoever we say is included, which is based on the recommendation, everybody except restaurants. April 1st, they have to start collecting, and then on January 1st of 2024, it's no more plastic,
Right.
and there's no more grocery category.
That's correct.
Correct.
There may be no small store category, I don't know, depending on what you guys decide after this meeting.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like for now, we're leaning toward exactly as written, so. Okay, any other thoughts on this for the next meeting?
Thank you. This was a kind of a.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a headbanger.
What I think would be really helpful at the next meeting, and I'll work with you, Lauren, on outreach. Wish we had Tom to hand it to, but we don't.
Yeah, no.
Is I think in the memo, kind of a little chart that really simply shows like Carbondale's current ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no plastic, it's this much, it only applies to groceries. The state ordinance says 10 cents, it exempts local stores and it exempts retail food. Carbondale's proposed ordinance is 20 cents, it exempts restaurants, but it includes local stores. Like that's pretty much, if I'm getting it, that's the summary, maybe the day, so that anybody here, we can print that off.
We can hand it to Raleigh.
Yeah. We can help people understand it, because it's just too legalese.
No problem.
I don't expect a lot of community pushback on this. I'll be surprised if we get it. The reality is, even if we didn't do anything, a lot of schools are going to be impacted by the state law, and so we're trying to make it consistent. We're trying to make it feel fair and not arbitrary.
I think a lot of store owners probably don't realize that, the state law is gonna impact them. And actually, they should have been collecting the money already.
Okay, one more thing for Christy and her relatively new finance team to figure out how to inform and collect and enforce.
We are getting there. So this is really getting us familiar with these roads.
Any last thoughts on this topic? We'll schedule it, maybe again in February, maybe we can kind of move things forward in the next.
Let's not save everything for Valentine's Day, though.
Oh, there you go.
Good job.
Thank you, Christy, thanks for the song.
Thank you. Got some good guidance.
And thank you, Christy, for the update on sales tax.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's good news.
Yeah.
Everyone saw that?
Yeah.
Sales tax was up over 14%. And even though it's starting to come down a little bit, that's a nice number to see.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's about 1.2% above our projection.
Right on.
Thanks. So I think we're gonna move into executive session. I'll let Kathy start to get us organized and then I'll read this formal thing. And we'll-
Why don't you read that and then I'll get out of this meeting and
Okay.
go into the other one.
Yeah, and Lonnie, I think you're gonna jump into the other Zoom link here in a moment.
Yeah, I can do that now. Or,
In a minute.
okay,
In a minute.
It's not open yet, Lonnie. Just give us a couple minutes.
okay.
Raleigh, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ollie. Thanks for getting the word out.
Motion second on the time they come over.
Yes. Okay. Do you know that those are $250, $225 boots? My daughter has those. And we can use from Urban Outfitters. She didn't know.
Mark, are you gonna stay for the executive session?
Only a few buttons that I don't usually, that's fine.
Stay for my-
I'm just waiting for them to make a motion and read this.
Mhm.
Too,
You
Raleigh.
too.
Good night, Raleigh.
Do you have the announcement?
I do. Am I ready to read it?
Yeah, you're gonna read it and then we're gonna take a break. I'm gonna run, she's gonna stop this one. I'm gonna run and start the executive session and then she'll end the executive session
Okay,
and Zoom.
all right. I will read this then.
Right, that makes sense.
It is January 24th, 2023, and the time is 8:20 p.m. For the record, I am the presiding officer, Ben Bolton, Mayor. As required by the Open Meetings Law, this executive session is being electronically recorded. Also present at this executive session are the following persons: Town Trustees Colin Laird, Chris Hassig, Marty Silverstein, and Lonnie Kitching, and Town Manager Lauren Gister. This is an executive session for the following purpose: for discussion of a personnel matter under CRS 246422F, not involving any specific employees who have not requested discussion of the matter in open session, the member of the body or elected official, the appointment of any person to fill an office of this body or of an elected official for personal policies that do not require the discussion of the matter personal, needs. I caution each participant to combine all discussions to the stated purpose of the executive session And then no formal action may occur in the executive session. If at any point in the executive session, any participant believes that the discussion is going outside the proper scope of the executive session, please interrupt the discussion and make an objection.
So I need a motion to go in.
I make a motion to go into executive session.
Motion by Marty, second by Chris, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
So you're turning that on.
I'm turning it off.